Well, hello and welcome to a new edition of We Are Sunderland in association with our two sponsors, the Fans Museum over in Sunderland and Cospex Opticians in Durham. You're welcome to today's edition with myself, Scott Wilson, and Dom Shaw. Dom, live and exclusive from a hotel room in Luton.
The joys and luxury of the job.
Isn't it?
I'd show you the view out the window, but honestly, you really don't want to see it.
I've been to Luton enough to be able to have a pretty good guess of roughly what that view is going to look like. So I was at Hull on Sunday, and obviously that was a good day for Sunderland. You were at Luton last night. That's obviously the game we're going to focus on, and I think it's safe to say that was an even better day for Sunderland. Now, you know, there've been some good ones this season. Don't get me wrong, beating Burnley at home, obviously beating Middlesbrough at home, but it just feels like last night's game was the point at which Sunderland said, we are the real deal and we're not going anywhere in this promotion race. It felt like a big old night.
Yeah, it did. You couldn't get away. Similar to, I think, the conversation we were having after the Leeds game for different reasons, really. That kind of feeling of, even though it's not yet the end of October, this feels like one of those games that at the end of the season we'll be looking back on. It feels significant, and this was exactly the same last night. And I think the celebrations at full time said that. I mean, obviously that was obviously followed the melee, which met the full time whistle, which we'll talk about. But it felt important. It felt significant. It felt like another box ticked for Sunderland, and kind of one by one, the responding to the questions or the doubts that we and I guess everyone had about them at the start of the season. And for all we know that Sunderland can outplay any team really, or most teams in the Championship, going to Luton and dealing with everything that Luton threw at you on a night match under the lights when Luton were at the best, really. Rob Edwards said it's the best they've played this season. To cope with all that, to ride out the first half, to get in front, but then to respond so well after Luton equalised and see it out and win. Yeah, I think it's the best result of the season so far. Leeds, I know, Burnley, the Middlesbrough win. I think the manner of the win last night makes it the best result and best win of the season so far.
Yeah, and you know, there's obvious parallels to be drawn to 2 seasons ago, isn't there? When at the end of that campaign, Sunderland couldn't deal with that game at Luton. Now, to be fair to Tony Mowbray and his side at that time, there were injury issues. There were square pegs in round holes in the back four that night. So there were excuses for it. But the top and bottom is that Sunderland team couldn't deal with the physicality of Luton, the pressure cooker environment of Kenilworth Road, everything that went along with that. What was the difference last night then? What was most impressive for you in terms of Sunderland handling what Luton threw at them?
Well, it was interesting because I asked Rob Edwards afterwards, you know what it takes to get out of this league, and you've obviously played against Sunderland 2 years previous or 18 months previous, like you said there. What do you make of this team? And he said, you know, technically they're brilliant. They've got some brilliant individual players, really talented. But he also pointed out how well organised they are and how they deserve immense credit for being able to dig out a result like they did last night. And I think that's so telling when the manager of Luton, who, let's be honest, dug their way to promotion that season, didn't it, with wins like the one last night, is saying that, then that says a lot. When you go through the team, I think you've got to start with Chris Mepham. I know we talked about him a few times, but he was just immense last night. And to beat Luton, especially in their own backyard, you've got to win the battle against Adebayo and Morris up front, haven't you? And Mepham and O'Nien did exactly that. He brought Alan Brown. Le Bris obviously brought Alan Brown into midfield, which I think was a shrewd, wise choice, really. He said he knows the Championship. Brown knows the Championship experience now, so we just thought that had come in handy, and it did. But then there's also to have the energy of Chris Rigg and Romaine Mundle just in front. There was a thankless task for Isidore up front, but he never stopped. And I was thinking this morning, at the start of the season, well, even at the start of this week, when we were talking about the questions you still have is, what about the depth of this squad? Well, last night, Sunderland were missing Ballard, Elise, Mayenda, and Roberts was on the bench. Well, if you'd have said at the start of the season, you're going to be without those 4 players come the end of October. I know the Roberts one was a choice, but he wasn't in the team. Then you'd think, wouldn't you, how they're going to deal with that? Yet the players who are coming in and the players who've been given an opportunity, like Isidore, like Mepham, like Brown when he's had a chance, are taking it, aren't they? Like you said, it feels like with each week, they're kind of serving notice more and more, doesn't it?
Mm. So let's touch on 2 or 3 of the players you've kind of flagged up there. Let's start with Mepham. And, it's easy to sit here and say, we told you so. I think most fans will want to be doing that and will be doing that. But it's a kind of inarguable truth, isn't it, that tweaking the policy this summer, you can clearly throw Brown into that as well, has worked. Because Mepham more so, but Mepham and Brown have made a major impact on this Sunderland team and squad. And I was up with Le Bris doing his pre-match stuff earlier in the week, and he, I asked him about Mepham and the whole kind of transfer policy, and he pretty much said, yeah, you've got to have a balance. There has to be a balance. Well, I think we would all say that in the last few seasons, the last few windows, the balance probably hasn't been right. This summer, arguably for the first time under this regime, it feels like it was right.
Yeah, definitely. And I think the other thing, what it has shown is maybe Sunderland will now realise that they can't rely too heavily on signing young players from overseas, because if you look at the players who they have brought in, the likes of Bar, Aushish, Rusin, I know he's not a young player, Hemia, who's gone, Pembele, who went, you could go on and on, couldn't it? None of those are really featuring. None of those are playing a part. The spine of this team, this 11, tends to be players they've signed from domestically, doesn't it? Hume, right back, Sirkin, left back, Elise, centre half, obviously Bellingham in midfield, Brown now. Mayenda's the obvious exception, but then Mundle, I know he was playing overseas, but he's a domestic player, isn't he? You get the point. So I think it's shown 2 things really, that you can still find gems overseas, but not to rely too heavily on young players who are coming and having to acclimatise to the league, but also, like you say, just that experience, like being able to call on Brown in the midfield for a game like that, and having Mepham at the back, I think has made a world of difference. Because if you don't sign Mepham in the final days of the window, then who's coming in to replace Ballard and Elise? What you're doing? Zach Johnson, maybe Hjelde, perfectly serviceable, good, solid centre half, but he's not going to have had the impact Mepham had. And if you're picking your battles, picking your defenders for a game like Luton last night, then you'd pick Mepham over Hjelde or Johnson or whoever else every single day of the week, wouldn't you? So, yeah, I think Sunderland deserve credit for that. But it's nothing that hadn't been pointed out to them, had it, for months in advance. I mean, kind of talked about in several press conferences last season, wasn't it? Do you need more experience? Do you need more nous? And yeah, we're seeing that was absolutely the case.
And, you mentioned there the Brown move, obviously bringing him in. Roberts goes to the bench. Rigg moves into a wider position. I mean, it's just another tick in the box in terms of a move Le Bris has made this season that has worked. And, we're seeing it week in, week out, that tactically, this guy just knows what he's doing, doesn't he? And it's an easy thing to say, but you take for granted the fact that he's come into a league he doesn't know. He's moved, he's moved from his homeland. He's inherited a group of players that, yes, he'll have watched them on video and all that, but obviously prior to the summer, he'd never worked with them or anything like that. And yet his technical and tactical ability is just shining through every week in terms of the decisions he makes, the way he sets his side up, his in-game management that I think has been excellent all season. I mean, we don't want to get our head of ourselves yet. There's going to be a lot of challenges along the way this season. But whatever happens now, I think we can say that pretty much all the doubts that were raised about Le Bris coming in the summer, his lack of experience, the fact he'd been relegated at Lorient last season, all of this, well, they're out the window now, aren't they? I mean, Sunderland seem to have got an absolute top-notch coach.
Yeah, you mentioned the in-game management there. That was what struck me last night, because
it was at Hull as well.
Yeah, it was a rough old ride that first half last night, and Sunderland couldn't breathe. They couldn't get out their own half. Luton was through no fault of their own. Luton were just suffocating him in the way that they do, and Sunderland couldn't string 3 or 4 passes together. There was one spell where they strung 4 or 5 passes together, and I turned and said to the guy next to me in the press conference, in the press box, it felt like they needed that just to take the heat out of it for seconds, really. But I think 2 things were noticeable. Patterson went down for treatment. Whether he needed it or not, I'm not sure, but Sunderland needed the break that it presented. And he went down for treatment after about half an hour. And Sunderland's players scampered over to the touchline to speak to Le Bris, and he gathered him round and was clearly dishing out instructions. And he said afterwards he made a couple of tweaks in the first half. You can't help but think, well, that was then when he got him over. But also the second half was much improved. So after that, like breathless bruising first half, to get him in and to kind of be able to take stock after a game like that and make the tweaks that were clearly significant. Yeah, that in-game management and just refusal to panic. And I was looking over, actually, because it was a red-hot atmosphere last night. As you can imagine, the fans behind the press box were getting tasty. And I looked over to Le Bris at one point and thought, I wonder what he makes of this, because he kind of got out like this before. And he said afterwards, like, that for me was just a real British atmosphere, and I absolutely loved it. Fair play. I mean, I know it helps when you're winning, obviously.
When you win,
But yeah, I was thinking the same with Pedro Ribeiro. I bet he signed up for when he joined.
That's a baptism of fire, isn't it? Goodness me.
But, I mean, you were at Hull. You mentioned there, and you said about obviously not getting carried away. But we talked, didn't we, a couple of weeks ago, and we said that the challenge in this group of games is the away games. Well, they've got 6 points out of 6. And you're looking at the games coming up now. You're at Oxford. You're at the Oxford game on Saturday.
Yeah.
You can't see anything other than a Sunderland win. I know that's a dangerous mindset, but you can't, can you? QPR are bottom and struggling.
Yeah.
Preston are no great shakes. Coventry at home, they've had a slow start. Like, it's hard not to start getting a bit carried away, isn't it?
It is. It is. Now, the championship's the championship. And like you say, Oxford at home, in some ways, is the classic championship game that brings you back down to earth, isn't it? And we've all been here countless times before. But Hull on Sunday, for me, was the kind of game that if you're going to get promoted, you take 3 points from that game. Sunderland could easily have lost that game 1-0. And that's not to say they weren't the better side, because they were. But it was a nothing game to a large extent. There weren't a lot of chances. Yes, Sunderland were the better side, but obviously Bedia has that one that he hammers against the post. If that creeps into the corner and Hull win 1-0, then they're probably going away in the same way that Sunderland went away, thinking, well, it was a tight game, but we've taken the points. And they're the games that rack up come the end of the season. The games when you're not at your free-flowing best. You know, like I say, it's a pretty unremarkable game all round. But one moment of magic from Isidore, and, you know, what a goal that was, wins them it. Now, Luton was different because that's a completely different test, and that made different examinations of Sunderland. You know, that wasn't a game where there wasn't a lot going on. There was loads going on in that game last night. But with Sunderland to get out on the right end of that, as you say, that's another box ticked. Now, Saturday, in a way, is another box to be ticked, because it's a routine, if you like, home game that Sunderland are going to be completely expected to win. Fully expect Oxford to come and sit in, try and be defensive, try and keep things as tight as they can, look to hit on the break if it's at all possible. Sunderland, I expect, will dominate possession at the weekend in a way that they didn't last night, and they kind of did in the first half at Hull, but they certainly didn't in the second. So that, again, is a different challenge. Now, it's one that I think Sunderland certainly have the tools to handle, and I'd make them really strong favourites. But it is another challenge, you know, in the same way that you have to be able to win those away games when there's not an awful lot going on and you just get the goal and get out. You also have to win the home games when teams come up to not be particularly adventurous against you and say, okay, well, what have you got? Well, we'll see what Sunderland have got at the weekend. But like you said, there's not many boxes that need ticking that haven't been yet.
And we spoke to, well, I didn't, but the press spoke to Romaine Mundle last night after the game. I was up waiting for Le Bris to come into the press conference room for his post-match. But Mundle was saying how Le Bris just, won't let us get carried away, which you can well imagine. And what I thought was interesting was, so obviously there's the kind of melee scrap, fracas. There was the classic, what is this? Is this a fracas?
Yeah. How are we going to describe this?
Yeah.
It's like the levels, isn't it? When does a melee turn into a fracas?
Yeah, I think it was a melee until Luke O'Nien lunged in like he did, and then that took it up a level.
Yeah, once he's involved, it goes from level 5 to an 8 straight away.
Yeah. So there was obviously all that, and the atmosphere inside. The Luton fans were going wild, as you can imagine. The Sunderland players are kind of smirking and smiling and pushing the buttons as they make their way down the tunnel, and they'd celebrated in front of the fans. Like, it felt significant, like I say there. So I said, Le Bris, what's it like down in that dressing room now? It must be absolutely buzzing. And he said, tired. We have to think of Oxford now on Saturday. And you think, that's just a small insight.
That is, isn't
what
it?
The players, you can well imagine the message, can't you, today when the players are back in, because they were travelling back last night, right? Good job done last night. Now on to Oxford.
However, they got back last night. I can't imagine it's a stop off at the Weatherby Whaler for a bit of sustenance and a few cans. I
was just about to say, I don't think there'll have been a crate bought for the journey.
No, somehow not. No. Chris Rigg. I mean, find me a new superlative about Chris Rigg. What a goal. Yeah,
it was brilliant, wasn't it? And to adapt to the way, I know he's played there before and the kind of right side of the attack, but to adapt like he did. And all of Luton's best play came down that left side with Doughty and Chong. And Rigg got a yellow early on. Well, I say early on, like after half an hour or so. And someone were chasing around a lot. And I thought, this is a bit worrying, really. You've got Hume behind him, who's one yellow card away from a suspension.
Yeah.
And I thought at one point, there's no way Sunderland are going to get through this without either Rigg picking up a second yellow or Hume getting the yellow that's going to rule him out. So the way that they both dealt with that was brilliant. But then the goal, there was so much to do still, wasn't there, when he pounces on the loose ball in the box? But to wriggle to create space for himself, and then to have the composure to shoot under Kaminski. It is hard to find ways to find new ways to praise him, isn't there? But I think kind of the ultimate compliment really is Le Bris chooses to tinker with his team to deal with the physical threat of Luton, but keeps 17-year-old Chris Rigg in the midfield, which says it all, really, doesn't it?
Yeah. And another one then, let's go to Mundle. I mean, we've danced around the subject all season. We've done everything we possibly can to avoid the new Jack Clark moniker. He's making it blooming hard to not go down that route, because that goal was, it was Jack Clark 2.0, wasn't it? I mean, brilliant finish. But again, his goal scoring record now is way better than Clark's was at the start of his Sunderland career, and Clark was doing that in League One. So you've got to give Mundle a huge amount of credit for the way that he stepped in there and immediately made the place his own. And we've kept on saying repeatedly there will come a point this season where Sunderland will miss Jack Clark. Well, will they?
Well, I thought of Clark last night, because a few times last season we said, didn't we? Well, more than a few times we said, when Clark's on the pitch, Sunderland always have a chance. There's always that where he turns nothing into something, and they've always got a chance of getting a point from a game or winning a game. And that was what it kind of reminded me last night, when Mundle creates something out of nothing, gets the ball on the left, still loads of work to be done, and scores that brilliant goal. And Rob Edwards was saying afterwards how disappointed he was with that, because he said a lot of our work in the build-up was on Sunderland wide players. He expected Roberts to play, he said, but Sunderland's wide players, and the fact that they're so dangerous when they cut inside, all of our defensive game plan really was built on not letting them do that. Well, sometimes it's a classic case. I always think back to Ian Robben, when Robben was playing. Like, you knew exactly what he was going to do, but you couldn't stop him doing it.
Well, Salah's very like that, isn't it?
Yeah.
You watch teams defending Salah, and you think, you know exactly what he's going to do, but he just does it.
Yeah, and there was an element of that last night when Mundle gets the ball on the left. There's only one way he's going, and Luton's defenders know that. They still can't stop him, and the finish is, it's class, isn't it? It's one of them. The minute it leaves his boot, And he's been to deal with the kind of expectation and pressure of replacing Jack Clarke and being the new Jack Clarke. He's been brilliant this season, hasn't he? He really has so far.
And you know, like you said, the worry, or at least one of the worries right through the season so far, really has been the depth issue. Is there enough depth? Are Sunderland just a few injuries away from problems? And there probably are areas of the field, right back's probably the real glaring one where that's an issue. But as you said, Alan Brown's back now. Aaron Connolly's had a couple of substitute appearances under his belt. He's getting fitter and nearer. Eliza Mayender and Dan Ballard almost certainly won't be available for Oxford at the weekend, but should be available within the next week after that. Get them back in and around it. And suddenly that bench that you were looking at a couple of games ago thinking, there's not much there, is there? That's going to look an awful lot stronger too.
It is. And I don't for 1 minute, I mean, he might, but I don't for 1 minute think he will freshen it up on Saturday. But he can if he wants to, can't he? You can give Connolly a start if he thinks Isidore needs a breather after two kind of breathless, tireless games. You've got Patrick Robertson now, who's had a break in midweek. In a few weeks, you're going to have Ballard and Elise back, and you've got choices to make there at the back. My end is still to come back. So yeah, he has got options there for those 3 game weeks, and there's a few of them coming up, isn't there? So clearly there's still questions to be asked about whether the likes of Bellingham and Rigg and Isidore and Mundle can maintain this incredibly high standard through to like January, February. But at the minute, I think it's more so you kind of going looking for potential issues rather than issues that are slapping you in your face, because there aren't any, are there?
So Oxford this weekend then, prediction?
Yeah, well, we'll come to you on it, seeing as though you're there first. What do you reckon?
Yeah, I think Sunderland will win, but I just have a feeling it might, at the end of what's been a really hard week, 2 away games, a load of travelling, I think there's a chance that they're not at their kind of free-flowing best. I think Oxford, well, I'd be amazed if Oxford didn't come and certainly initially just look to sit in and be pretty unadventurous. I'm going to go 1-0 Sunderland. I think it might be a grind, but I think they'll get over the line. So 1-0, Bellingham, 72.
I'll go, I agree. I don't think it'll be a walkover. I think I'll go 2-0, but a hard-fought 2-0. Yeah. So maybe Isidore on the hour and a late Connolly goal from the bench to wrap it up.
That would be nice. That would be nice.
But yeah, I mean, if you win there, what a week! What a week that'll be.
Goodness me. So what's the plans then? We're recording this on the morning after, obviously. So have you been down with the Partridge style big plate and got your buffet breakfast? Is that done and dusted?
6 pancakes I've had.
Oh, that's it.
Yeah,
I
went for a wander around Luton to see the sights, which didn't last long. And then back in for a big pancake breakfast. And heading.
Tell you what, you know how to live, don't you?
Heading for home.
And now you've got about 7 50-mile-an-hour runs on the M1 to negotiate. That's going to be a lovely trek back, isn't it?
Yeah, yesterday that goes on for an absolute eternity. Yeah, I think the players were flying back last night. You always think, don't you? You get back to your hotel room 45 minutes. Well, at midnight last night, you think they're going to be home. They'll
be back. Yeah.
Wilson Isidore's going to be tucked up in bed now, reflecting on a job well done.
Man. Yeah. Well, safe travels, and thanks everyone for watching. I hope you've enjoyed it. As I say, obviously keep right over the We Are Sunderland site over the weekend. I'm at the Stadium of Light Saturday. Regis Le Bris doing his presser on Friday, obviously a little bit later this week. So we'll have all the coverage of that. We'll be back next week with another We Are Sunderland briefing, hopefully reflecting on, as Dom says, a 9 out of 9 week. Thanks to the Fans Museum. Thanks to Cospex Opticians. If you're watching on the YouTube channel, then please like, subscribe, leave us a comment. Subscribe if you can. It is massively helpful to us with the old algorithms and stuff like that. And it also means you won't miss any of our briefings. If you're listening on any of the various podcast platforms, then rate and review and drop us a message on X or anything like that. Anything you want us to talk about, anything you want flagging up. Enjoy the weekend. And we'll see you again next week for some more We Are Sunderland.